Well, that was a perfectly smooth launch. I'm sure we'll all agree. Welcome back to Bastionland Broadcasting. After our hiatus, we came back last week with a marathon session looking at the entire Eclectic Bastion jam. Today's stream, by comparison, is going to be a little bit more digestible. I'm going to be looking at creating some oddities for Electric Bastionland and Into the Odd. How I go about doing that. I'm going to get in some digs at 5th edition D&D because I know that's what everyone craves. And then when the stream is done, something I'm going to try out is doing slightly shorter main segments of the stream and then having something a bit silly at the end as a little dessert to the main event, so to speak. So, oddities in Electric Bastionland and in Into the Odd, where they're called Arcana, but it's basically the same thing. The principle was always to have magic be something that isn't tied down to a character class. So you don't have 3 regular people and then 1 demigod that can bend reality and get access to a list of weird, crazy abilities. Because what I want is for everybody to have loads of weird, crazy abilities that they can pull on. Obviously, just doing that outright creates all sorts of issues. So what I'm going to look at today is how to have oddities that are both interesting, evocative, open up sort of creative opportunities, but also doesn't just make your game descend into absolute chaos. And there's a few ways we can do that. But to contrast, we're going to look at a source of inspiration, if you like, which is D&D 5th edition spell list. So it's a bit unfair to compare oddities to spells in D&D because D&D is designed in such a way that the expectation is there that wizards or any kind of spellcasting class, by the time they reach, say, 5th, 6th level, they'll have a really good broad selection of spells, and they're choosing those spells from a huge list, and it's like a menu that you choose from. So because of that, they're kind of a lot more restricted than oddities, because the expectation with oddities was never that players would look down a list of oddities. So if they found the list of 100 oddities on my blog, I wouldn't expect them to go to the GM and say, oh, I'd really like for my character to get this bear jelly, or I really want my character to get the portal gun. It's not called the portal gun, the space folder. And it's not set up in the same way. Players generally aren't choosing what they get. They might reach a situation where they can choose between a number of different oddities, but generally they're sort of encountered at the GM's, the conductor's kind of I don't want to say at their mercy, but like it's down to the conductor to put those in the game in the same way that they're putting the situations in the game. It's part of their world, other than what they get at character creation, that is. So it's a bit different, and I'm not going to look at these and say, oh yeah, well these are really boring in comparison to oddities, because I do understand that the structure around them is a bit more restrained, and they kind of, well, there's some examples that are worse than others. There's some where I feel like they did just not make it interesting enough. This isn't going to be me going through and ranking every D&D spell. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking through each of the 10 levels of spells here. So 9 levels and cantrips. I think I've just got wizard spells here, arcane spells rather. So we're not touching the cleric stuff. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be seeing if I can pluck 2 spells from each level that I think are interesting and look at how I could turn them into an oddity. Because to begin with, the very first Arcana in Into the Odd, before release even, in like an early edition, they were kind of more like spell books. So like you might find a spell book or a ring or an item that had like 3 or 4 spells in it, and it had a number of different functions, and the spells were much more like traditional D&D spells. But then, as I kind of worked on it, I wanted them to be more like these. I use the word diegetic all the time, so I need to stop. But it's these items that exist outside of the numerical mechanics of the game. So, to explain what I mean, I'm going to find one that's a bad example of what I think a spell should not be, and by extension, what I think an oddity should definitely not be. And I don't know the 5th edition spell list very well at all. I had a quick look at this earlier today, but there's so many. It's very difficult to look through. But I certainly remember this candidate. Resistance. You touch one willing creature. Once before this spell ends, the target can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to one saving throw of its choice. It can roll the die before or after the saving throw. So they're getting plus d4 to one saving throw. It's not the worst, because what I'm looking for in these spells is a number of things. I'm looking for things that give you a tool that you didn't have before. So I always think of spells like it's the extension of like the 10-foot pole. It's something that lets you do something that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do, or makes you think about approaching problems in a slightly different way. So to use an extreme example, rather than just have resistance be you get a plus d4 to your saving throw, I might just have, so let's call this, I'm looking for like an item that we could put this on. So if somebody in the chat can tell me just like an object that you could carry about your person, please don't make it a ring, but it's going to be the resistance thing. And rather than just giving you like a plus d4 on something, because the dream scenario is that you cast this resistance on, say, the rogue, and then they sneak ahead, they spring a trap, and they fail their saving throw by like 1, and then they use their resistance and they pass, and then it's like the wizard protection has saved their life. That's great, but there's a lot of times that that's not going to happen, because either, I don't know, it's not a big enough boost. And I get that this is a cantrip, and cantrips have to be very low impact, but this just feels like something that I would do and then either forget about it, or nothing would happen with it throughout the game, or maybe once in a blue moon it actually affects things. Eric Vulgaris says a postage stamp, so we're going to take that. It's the resistance stamp. So lick this. Let's say it's a book of stamps. Book of 6 stamps. Lick a stamp and stick it to somebody's head. As long as it remains there, they can ignore 1 source of harm from so these are going to be written really badly because I'm writing them on the cuff, so I would go back and edit these and make these like actually workable. From a specific source. 1 source of harm from a specific source. No, 1 instance of harm from a specific source. I apologize for my typing in the microphone. I will try and rein it in now. This destroys. Why are you bolding me this? This destroys the stamp. Also, the stamp falls off after a few moments, let's say. No, falls off if it gets wet or left for longer than an hour. So this is like this needs an editor. So I'm warning you. If you looked at some of the text in the Oddities in Electric Bastionland, please don't underestimate how much editing went into them. They were probably like the hardest thing to edit, because I would have like an item in my head and I would know what it meant to do, like the portal gun, for instance. And I would think, yeah, well, if I'm at the table, I would just explain to the players what it does and we'd use common sense. But I also don't want to write it like it's a legal document. So it's getting a fine line between keeping it short but making sure people understand what it does. So anyway, rather than something that might give you a D4, no, will give you a plus D4 to a save that might not actually do anything, in this case, you've got 6 of these stamps, so it's a limited number. You can lick it and stick it onto somebody's head, so you've got to make the decision to actually do it. And when you've stuck it on somebody's head, they can ignore 1 instance of harm from a specific source. So for instance, I'm going to be using like a very D&D example here just because I'm in that kind of frame of mind. If you said, I'm going to lick this stamp, put it on your head, this will protect you from a dragon's claws, or a dragon. This will protect you from the dragon. Then you run into the dragon's lair, it spits fire at you, and you'll be protected from 1 instance of harm. However, if you put it on and then you get wet, or you don't see a dragon for an hour, the stamp's going to fall off. So it becomes more of a problem-solving tool, and it's pretty powerful. Like, I don't know where this would sit in like a D&D spell level thing, but I already have issues with the kind of zero to hero nature of D&D. It just doesn't suit my playstyle because I'm generally running like short campaigns or one-shots. I don't have time to wait 9 months before I start getting to the interesting spells that let you do cool stuff that creates, memorable stories. So in this case, I don't feel like this is too crazy. I mean, 6 is quite a lot. You might want to knock it down to 3. You could make the stamp a bit more unreliable, so maybe there's a chance it's going to fall off even if it's just left there and you do something that exerts yourself, so the sweat might make it fall off. So yeah, that's what I would do instead of resistance, because that's rubbish and I'm great. So, spells. Now, I've done one that I don't like. I'm going to see if I can find an example of a cantrip that I do like. Now, the easy one is Prestidigitation, which I've not played much 5th edition, but both times I've played it as a spellcaster, I've taken Prestidigitation because it just lets you do loads of cool stuff. Like, it's just like little parlor tricks, isn't it? So you can, and I used it a lot. Like, it's such a no-brainer to take that if you want like creative, interesting things to do. Let's choose one that I don't recognize. Guidance, is that going to be terrible? So this guidance is just like the same as resistance, but it's to do with an ability check instead of a saving throw. Great, cool. Green Flame Blade. So I feel like this is just going to be given like you a boost to your attack. So as part of the action used to cast this spell, you must make a melee attack with a weapon against one creature. On a hit, the target suffers the attack's normal effects, and green fire leaps from the target to a different creature of your choice that you can see within 5 feet of it. The second creature takes fire damage equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. So I cast the spell and then hit a target, and fire leaps from that target to hit another target. Okay. Now, I don't mind that, but this is like touching on an area that's something I want to avoid. It's not quite a direct damage spell. It's not a magic missile, bang, you take damage. But it's getting kind of close. We'll come back to direct damage spells and why I don't like them. I mean, it should be quite obvious at this point, but what I'll do is I'm going to take the spirit of this, which is the idea that you hit somebody and then it damages one of their allies nearby. So we're going to have, we're going to call this an empathy bullet. So a trick that I use quite regularly, and it is a bit of an easy, blunt fix to the problem, because after playing for a while, you'll notice that characters have a lot of oddities, and they sort of hoard them, and before you know it, they've got so many options, it becomes a bit overwhelming. So limited number of uses is a nice way of doing it, where it's a single use item. A more nuanced way of doing it is like making it so that it's not always an ideal tool to use, so there's like a downside to using it. I don't like to make it so that it's unreliable in that you need to roll to use it. Like if you said, oh, you have to pass a charisma save to use this oddity. I'm not a big fan of that. I think there's better ways of doing it. So empathy bullet. No, you know what? We'll call it an empathy gun, and we won't make it single use. And what we'll say is this. So it's a D8 pistol. If you kill the target, if you cause critical damage, let's say, damage to your target, they fall harmlessly to the ground. The nearest ally to them takes the critical damage instead. I mean, this is like busted already. This is like this is weirdly specific in its use. Takes the critical damage instead. So you shoot the weaker target, they fall to the ground harmlessly, and their big ally clutches their chest and falls to the ground, and they're dying. I feel like D8 is a little bit good for that. Let's make it a D6 weapon. So the thing you've got to think is, especially when you're making something that causes damage, is this replacing your normal weapon too easily? My biggest regret about Into the Odd was one of the arcana that were in there was the heat ray, which I'm sure I've complained about before, but it was in there as a bit of a legacy of like the sort of sci-fi and fantasy mashup idea that sort of started the whole project. And all it did was it caused, I think, D6 or D8 damage, and it ignored armor. So it was just against an armored opponent, it was outright better than a normal gun. And it didn't do anything exciting. The name implied that you could like use it to set fire to stuff, but because it just said causes damage and ignores armor, I think people just saw it as like a better weapon. So here, I don't think, I mean, if you wanted, you could even like drop the damage down to like D4, or you could give it like another problem where you could have like, if like you could say something like if you roll a 1, then something bad happens. So that you would use that only in this specific situation where you've got somebody with a weak ally that you want to take out. Eric Volgara says, just bring along a bunch of rats and shoot them to do damage to guards. No, because this is the empathy gun. So it's got to be the nearest ally. So you would need to find somebody that had a pet rat and then shoot the pet rat. It only works if there's empathy between the two beings here. Right, we're out of focus again. I'm assuming this is going to pick up. So let's press on. We've done the cantrips. I was hoping to try and do 20, but we'll see how we get on. Oh, no, that's not right. Any favourites in the chat from level 1 5th edition spells? I'm going to pick one myself, and then I'll pick one on somebody's recommendation. Oh, okay. Hex sounds interesting to me because I like the theme of the like curses. I think they make for very interesting spells, and it's quite difficult to get them to work well against in the sort of D&D context when you haven't necessarily got recurring enemies. let's come on, focus. You can do it. You can do it, camera. You can do it. Am I in focus here? That's good enough. So you place a curse on a creature that you can see within range. Until the spell ends, you deal an extra d6 necrotic damage to the target whenever you hit it with an attack. Also, choose one ability when you cast the spell. The target has disadvantage on ability checks made with the chosen ability. If the target drops to 0 hit points, you can use a bonus action of yours to curse a new creature. Remove curse removes it. Blah blah blah. So again, it's a curse, but it's very like mechanical, and it's very much based around hitting things and causing damage, which, you know, it's D&D. I'm realistic about this, but yeah, it's going to be a hexed something. I'm just going to call it a hexed chocolate for now. I might come back to that. So I think you can make curses really horrible as long as there's sort of as long as they're very specific. So when you think about like a curse in a fairy tale, so the obvious one that comes to my mind is like the sort of Sleeping Beauty thing, where she's cursed to prick herself on a spinning wheel, and she'll fall asleep, but she'll wake up with true love's first kiss. That might be a little bit elaborate for your Thursday night D&D game, but I think if you make it specific and you make it so there is a way that they can break the curse, it becomes quite interesting. So let's have, I'm assuming they have to eat the chocolate. So if the target eats this chocolate, whoever eats this chocolate, let's make it sound like a proper curse. Whoever so eats this chocolate, is cursed, obviously. And now you put me on the spot where I'm gonna have to think of like a good curse. So an obvious thing, I like it when a curse is that they can't do something, so you're forcing them to come up with interesting responses to it. So it's like the focus is on them now, and they have to change their behavior. It's not just a case of they're cursed and now you can hit them extra hard. So whoever eats this chocolate is cursed to consume any food that they see until they have eaten everything in sight. So you give this to somebody in a place with lots of food, and they are now going to spend the next 6 hours eating all this food. You give it to somebody in a room with a loaf of bread, well, a piece of bread, and they're going to be, they're going to be out of it pretty quick. The fact that it's a chocolate is bugging me, because the chocolate is obviously an after dinner affair. So I'm going to say that this is whoever so drinks this aperitif. So it's going to be like a hexed, like a cocktail sort of thing. I'm just going to call it a hexed aperitif, which is quite specific. Illusory script says cosmic orrery. Dog in a Pond suggested hellish rebuke. I vaguely remember something about hellish rebuke, and I can't remember why, but I remember not liking it. But illusory script, I think, has some interest there. Where are we? Illusory script, because I haven't done an illusion yet, and I think illusions, out of all of the sort of standard D&D like spells sort of things, they've got the most potential to be interesting. Them, illusion and divination, I think, are the two that kind of, to me, are closest to doing what I think this sort of thing should do, which is giving you interesting tools that break the rules and let you approach the game in interesting ways. So here we go. You write on a parchment or suitable material. To you and any creatures you designate when you cast the spell, the writing appears normal. Blah blah blah. To all others, the writing appears as if it was written in an unknown magical script. Alternatively, you can cause the writing to appear to be an entirely different message. So the thing that's bugging me about this a little bit, and I won't get too much into the slagging off D&D, but it's that's kind of weak. Like you're writing a message that you and your friends can read, but no one else can read it. I think if you committed to being an illusionist enough that you've chosen this spell, it feels kind of lame that you're using like a first level spell to use it. Like, I think this should just be like something you can do, because you're an illusionist. Like, this should be like your bread and butter. So I'm not going to be able to spell illusory, and I'm in WordPad, which means, oh wow, you saw it here live that I spelled illusory correct first time. That's not how I thought the word was spelled. So the issue I've got with it is it's kind of like just a bit like an invisible ink sort of thing, and it's cool, but I would rather have this just be like an item you can get. And I feel like there's just more interesting ways of doing that thing where you're writing a message that you and your friends can understand but other people won't. Like, you could use a code. There's all sorts of things that could be done. So I'm trying to think if we can extend that somehow. Maybe. No, I don't like an outfit. So something that's like conveying a message, I guess. Okay. We've got one. So when we're thinking about messages, we're thinking about a pigeon, obviously. This pigeon can carry messages unerringly to whoever you send it to. This is why I don't write things and publish them straight away. This pigeon carry messages unerringly to whoever you send it to. It appears invisible. No, we're better than that. It's not appearing invisible. To the receiver of the message, it appears as a bright, majestic bird. To anybody else, it resembles a clueless, forgettable sparrow. What's the most forgettable bird? Yeah, so you can send a message with this bird. No one's going to intercept it because it just looks like a scrappy little bird, except for the person you're sending it to. Now, I don't know if that's much better than illusory script, but the thing that I like is that it becomes attached to an animal, so it innately has a bit more hijinks potential to it. So that's level 1 done. We're gonna be hard pressed to make 20 of these things. Al Coops is asking, how's life as a full-time RPG guy? It's great. Yeah, no complaints at all. The problem is what I've realized about myself in doing this is, whereas when I was sort of trying to fit in these projects alongside like a day job, I would be quite relatively focused on like getting one thing finished. But now that I've got sort of time to focus on multiple things, I've got like 6 projects that are kind of like all at various levels of finished. So I'm not sure if I'm actually going to get stuff out any quicker than I was previously, but I'm definitely doing more stuff. Right. Aganatzar's Scorcher. We're going to have to use that, obviously, because of the name. And it sounds like it's going to be crap because it's an evocation, which is kind of the most boring of the schools, I think. Osotaki has pointed out, like, yeah, the illusory script could be good for contract fuckery. Yeah, getting someone to sign a contract that they... Oh, I don't know. No, because it would just appear unreadable to them, wouldn't it? So it would be better if you could get it to, like, it looks like it says something specific to them, but it says something else to you. But that'll be in the illusion school somewhere. So, what's this spell? A line of roaring flame, 30 feet long, emanates from you in a direction you choose. Each creature in the line must make a dexterity saving throw. The creature takes 3d8 damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful. So it's just like a standard blast of fire spell. Now, how do you make these interesting in a system like Electric Bastionland, where you've got fire bombs and you've got, arguably, well, you do have flamethrowers. There's a flamethrower in the book. How do you make the sort of more traditional fire blast style spell interesting as an oddity? And I'm not sure. I think what you have to do, I don't think you can make it interesting when it's just about the damage. I think you have to give it something else that it does differently to just a weapon. So in this case, what was this guy called? Right, so we'll stick with the Scorcher. We'll call it the Precision Scorcher. So this is a firebomb. Now, I can't remember whether it's D8 or D6 in the book, so forgive me if this isn't right. Like a D8 blast weapon. Okay. A firebomb that only burns the specific material that you whisper the name of before throwing it. So you could whisper into it. An obvious one would be wood, and then when you throw it, it would set fire to all the wood in the area, and any people in there would be unharmed. Or the other way around, if you wanted to protect your property, you could say flesh and throw it, and then the people would be burnt and your wooden house would be fine. You could also get more interesting with it. You could probably be specific about, if you're fighting some like an enemy that's like made out of a specific material, like you could say bone. If there were like some skeletons or something, it would like burn the bone. And I guess, would people be affected? This is for you to work out with your conductor. Yeah, you could just say Jeff and throw it, and then only Jeff catches fire. So yeah, Precision Scorcher. I think that's something. The sort of the line between oddities and just like technology, it has to do something that doesn't make much sense. It has to have a kind of, not necessarily supernatural, but a kind of a rule breaking element to it. So I didn't ask you all actually, but what's the second one that we're taking from the second level? Hang on. Have I been... No, we're fine. So from second level, give me another one. I mean, second level, there's some interesting ones. But what, second level, is that like third? I don't know D&D well enough at the moment, so I think to get a second level spell, I guess you're like a third level caster. Magic Mouth. 2 people want Magic Mouth. One of the spells I'm familiar with. So, you implant a message within an object in range. A message that is uttered when a trigger condition is met. Must be 25 words or less, but it can be delivered over as long as 10 minutes. Finally, determine the circumstance that will trigger the spell to deliver your message. So you cast it on a wall and you say, when somebody walks by, say, "Be gone from my place," basically. this is actually a really... It is a really solid spell in many ways. The problem you've got, and this is the problem you're going to face with everything in D&D, is there's going to be a certain type of player that when the wizard picks this spell, they're going to think that they're not contributing to what D&D 5th edition is, because this spell is purely about like hijinks. It's not about efficient dealing of damage. I would argue it's got extremely limited combat use. You know, you could use it to like get a bit of an advanced warning, but it's kind of a bit, it's a tricky one to use in a combat sense, but it has a lot of interesting potential outside of combat. So I would absolutely choose this. It's kind of a tough one to fix as well, because I actually do quite like it. So let's think, if we've got Magic Mouth, how can we branch out from the mouth? I'm not going to go through a list of orifices, but we will go through some other body parts, maybe. I like Magic Nose because it sounds ridiculous, and I like calling it a magic nose. So a prosthetic nose that can be attached to any surface. I don't know where I'm going with this. While it remains, it blends into the surface, making it almost impossible to spot. When you collect the nose from the surface and place it against your own nose, you receive a sensory transfer of highlights, of smells that the nose has smelt in your absence. Does that make any sense? So you plug your little nose on the wall, you leave it there, you come back the next day, you put it against your nose, and you can smell what that nose has smelt. Now that's terrible, like that's awful. I'm going to say to any surface or being. So you could, like, I guess you could stick it to the back of something. So it's like a smell recorder. Now, this is a good example of the kind of oddity that I like to make. And I like to have the full spectrum here. So I said earlier that this resistance stamps might have been a bit too powerful maybe, but that I don't mind having things that are quite impactful. I also don't mind having things that are just like, you get it and you're like, what am I meant to do with this? How am I meant to make this useful? So this is the kind of thing that the players will shove in their backpack, and they're going to struggle to sell it because who would buy this? But at some point they will look on their list, on their player character sheet, and much like digging through their backpack, they might, in a desperate situation, realize that this is just the tool they need. I mean, it's pretty good. You could stick it on like a bit of rope and lower it down somewhere and then reel it back in, and you can smell what's down there. It's a tricky one, but I think it's good to have those in there. Also, Taika said it's great if you roll the dog character, but I guess the dog can already smell. I don't know. I guess does the dog receive like better smell updates from the nose? Maybe. Right, how many have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've done 6. Let's do 2 more before I move on to the stupid thing that I'm going to do after the stream. So we're going to jump up to 5th level, and we're going to choose one from here. I'm going to go down until I get one that I don't recognise, or one that doesn't immediately make sense. No, not a big fan. Hallow, I think I know what Hallow is, but I'm going to have a look. Yeah, so I do know this one, but let's do it. It's because I'm interested in the fact that the casting time is 24 hours. That always excites me. you touch a point and infuse an area around it with holy or unholy power. And then a load of specific types of monster cannot enter the area. So yeah, you're making hallowed ground that certain people can't enter. So this is all a bit fiddly and a bit like fantasy for me. So we're going to have some holy salt. So you can draw a circle in the ground with this salt. We're going to make this one use because I think it's going to be a bit stupid. So you can draw a circle in the ground with this salt while declaring 3 holy laws. Anybody that breaks these laws inside the circle is blasted with D12 damage in holy lightning. Simple as that. Only the original drawer can disrupt the circle. So you draw a circle of salt, you make up 3 holy laws of anything you want, and anybody that breaks those inside the circle is blasted with lightning. So I'm pretty happy with this, I won't lie. I think there's something similar to this somewhere. There's like a contract that you can get someone to sign in. It might even be an Into the Odd. But I like things like this where it kind of follows that Wish format where you have to stop and think, and you're not just pressing a button. You have to like create something. You have to either think of a question that you're going to ask to get an answer to. You have to think of what your wish is going to be. And in this case, you can think of 3 laws. And then you've got to trick somebody, I guess, into stepping into the circle and breaking one of those laws. So it's a very powerful tool, but it's one use, and you've got to have a plan. And if anything that forces the players to come up with a plan and execute it, I'm always kind of a bit more biased towards letting it work, because you want to reward them for having a good plan, don't you? Yeah. Theremin, Gen Furious, whatever the next one I go for, we will make it a Theremin, because that feels very appropriate. So the last spell, we're going to the top, 9th level. Has anybody in the chat ever actually gotten a character to the point where they can use a 9th level spell? Is that a thing? Psychic Scream just seems like such an obvious match for the Theremin. Let's see. Time Stop. That's tempting. Let's look at Time Stop. I think I remember it being just like actually kind of lame. So you stop. Yeah, it's D&D, so of course it's written like this. So you pause time and you get D4 plus 1 turns. And the spell ends when you do something that affects someone else. That's lame. Like, I get why it's there as a balancing thing, but if you're going to cast Time Stop and say, but don't you freeze time and then go and stab this person 6 times, it's like, well, let me do it. I've frozen time here. Psychic Scream. You unleash the power of your mind and blast the intellect of up to 10 creatures of your choice that you can see within range. So unintelligent creatures are not affected. Each target makes a saving throw. If they fail, they take a load of damage and they're stunned. If they pass, they get a bit less damage. Oh, if they're killed by it, their head explodes, assuming it has one. That's a nice touch. This seems like too good a fit for the Theremin. So it's going to be the Screamer Theremin. Now, the real easy way to balance this is exactly what you're thinking of. Anybody that hears this Theremin played, including the player, player is a strange word to use here, because it might sound like I'm breaking the fourth wall, but I mean like the performer, let's say. Anybody that hears this theremin played, how do we make it interesting so that it's not just like save or die? Suffers the following effects. So when it is like a killer effect like this, I like to give like one chance to do something. So bleeding from the nose and ears on the first turn, first round. On the second round of exposure, it must pass a strength save. Charisma, strength. I like charisma here. Or their head explodes. On the third round, their head explodes. Blocking your ears prevents effects beyond the bleeding, but even a moment of exposure beyond that triggers the later effects. So yeah, you can set off this theremin and cover up your ears, and then if everybody else does the same, it becomes a battle of trying to pull somebody else's ears open, pull their hands off their ears. There you go. And it's massively broken, because you can just drop it down, get some noise cancelling headphones from Bastion, and you can just use it to blow up the head of any creature. So what I would probably add in here is some sort of like power up effect. So maybe like the first, maybe on the first round, like any kind of creature that you target with this is gonna they're gonna be compelled to either flee or break the theremin. Victims are compelled to flee, to cover their ears, flee, or break the theremin. So you can't just go in somewhere, pop it down, and turn it on, and then watch the dragon's head explode. This is horrible, but I think it's fine to have it in there. And also, you've basically got like a weapon of mass destruction in your hands here. So I would make this a bit of a center point of a campaign, where if the players do get hold of this, it becomes like a focal point of the game. And now you probably have other people that want this. And what do you decide to do with that? So we've got 8 oddities there. I feel like we've covered decent ground. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to have a very short sort of 1-minute break. And then I'm going to come back with something that somebody suggested. Well, somebody didn't even suggest it as a joke. Somebody was talking about this. And as a joke, I said, oh, I should do that on the stream tonight instead of an actual proper stream. And somebody, I think it was Technoscald, if you're in tonight, said I would watch that. So yeah, you got your terrible wish come true. So I'm gonna go to off air, and then we're gonna come back. But for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. As always, you can find out more about what's happening with Electric Bastionland at bastionland.com. You can follow me at Bastionland on Twitter. You can obviously find me on Twitch, Bastionland, and at Patreon/Bastionland. So, for those of you who are sticking around, I'll be back in a moment. For the rest of you, stay safe.